In this video, I'm going to talk about the most common time tracking myths we encounter as a time tracking software company who helps businesses track employee time. Note, a lot of these myths arise from common situations, namely around employers who allow their employees to just tell them the amount of time that they've worked each week. Another common situation in which we find these myths is employers who simply track time on Excel or paper. Let's get into it. Myth number 1, you don't need to track time. This is a common misconception because according to the United States Department of Labor, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, any employer with hourly employees must maintain a record of that employee's hours worked back 2 years at a minimum. So if you're an employer and you have employees, you need to have a clear report of the hours your employees have worked. Now, technically, how you track that employee's time and how you get that report is up to you. But at the end of the day, if you want to have an accurate report, you need to track time. Myth number 2, time tracking takes too much time. This couldn't be further from the truth. I've worked with many employers and managers who regularly dealt with payroll taking 3 to 4 hours every pay period. And when they come over to a time clock software like TimeClick, that time usually shortens by probably 90%. Payroll takes 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes. And that's a pretty regular occurrence. If you're tracking time manually by yourself, you have to deal with all of the errors that your employees give you. What if they forget the time they came into work? What if they forget the time they left work? And what if they just give you a dishonest time? At the end of the day, in some fashion, you are going to have to resolve that as an employer rather than just a software holding an honest clock in and clock out that can't be manipulated. And of course, you would have to do all the math manually. With TimeClick, the math is done for you. Myth number 3, time tracking is about mistrust and micromanaging. I do meet with employers or business owners from time to time, generally who just allow their employees to tell them the time that they've worked. And there can be a bit of hesitancy that they now have to manage their employees more. But this is totally false. Implementing a time clock software like TimeClick isn't about micromanaging, and it's impossible for it to be micromanaging, especially because clocking in and clocking out takes 3 to 5 seconds per day for each employee. It actually creates an environment of accountability and clarity within the workplace. All employees and managers should know that at the end of the day, you have to pay legally. You have to pay your employees properly for the time that they've worked, and the only way to make sure you're doing that right is to have a time clock software in place. Myth number 4, time tracking overworks your employees. This is a gross exaggeration because, as I mentioned in the previous myth, clocking in and clocking out takes 3 to 5 seconds per day per employee. And your employees with a software like TimeClick, they no longer have to remember the times that they came in. They don't have to ask managers to look at the hours that they've worked. We have found that in almost every situation, massive amounts of time are saved when you have a software like TimeClick in place. The work amount is reduced drastically. Myth number 5, your employees will resent time tracking. This is possible, but extremely unlikely. And as I've seen and as I've experienced, if you do have employees who resent having to clock in or clock out, and they are hourly employees, at the end of the day, they're probably an employee who doesn't want to be held accountable. So the issue isn't time tracking here, the issue is accountability. Most employees are happy to clock in and clock out and properly and with clarity show the amount of time that they've worked and when they come in and when they leave. Myth number 6, time tracking invades privacy. All TimeClick is doing, as are most other time clock softwares, is measuring when employees clock in and clock out. Again, and if an employee is not okay with sharing that information, one, maybe they're a salary employee and it's not as relevant, or two, they're an hourly employee who just doesn't want to be held accountable. Now, there are time clock softwares out there that have a mobile app capability called geofencing or geo-tracking. In this situation, an employee is allowed to clock in and clock out from their phone, and the time clock software measures where they were when they clocked in and clocked out. Depending on your industry and your business needs and what you as a business do, this could be very helpful and can be very important. And in that sense, it will show the employer where employees clock in and clock out. For most businesses, this isn't really a need. Myth number 7, you can track time efficiently on paper. This is probably the most common myth that we encounter, especially for small business owners who may have just opened up and may just have a few employees. The amount of error that happens when tracking time on paper is insane. We hear the word chicken scratches a lot from employers who basically, it boils over, they come to TimeClick and they say, hey, I can't even read my employee's handwriting. I can't do this anymore. And time tracking becomes such a mess that they need to move over to the software. Even if you have only one person manage what goes onto your paper record, that person can easily manipulate that information, and or that person has to constantly maintain those records rather than just allowing employees to clock in and clock out themselves in a software like TimeClick. Myth number 8, time card software is too difficult to learn. TimeClick generally takes a few minutes to install, and with most of our users, we're able to set TimeClick up and get them running in about 15 minutes. Really, at a high level, the steps are just download, install, let's create a few employees, and you can start clocking in and out. It's that simple. And it's a lot faster than actually creating your own Excel template or Google Sheets template or trying to create a system on paper. Always go with the time tracking software over these other methods. They're not complicated. On that note, we have one of the best support teams in our industry, and we're glad to help every step of the way. Myth number 9, time clock software is too expensive. Generally speaking, this is false because the amount of time and money that you'll save on payroll and reducing time theft far exceeds whatever you'll pay for a time clock software, especially one like TimeClick. TimeClick is just a one-time purchase without any monthly fees, without any fees per user. The average license is just a one-time purchase of $399. I recommend checking out our time theft calculator. You can enter how many employees you have, the wage that they earn, and how many days they work per year on average, and it'll show you how much money you're losing each year based on average time theft statistics. Chances are you're going to save a lot of money by implementing a software like TimeClick. Myth number 10, time tracking only benefits employers. While it does have a substantial impact on employers in reducing the amount of time they spend on payroll and therefore saving them a lot of money, this also helps employees a lot. They no longer have to remember their times. They don't have to write down their times. In TimeClick, all employees have to do is double-click their name, type in their password, and click clock in, clock out. Moving forward, every employee's record will be crystal clear, concise, and consistent. Time tracking benefits your team all around, creates an atmosphere and environment of accountability and clarity. It helps everyone in the business from top to bottom.